Ron Howard said in that interview that when he was speaking to George Lucas, saying, what do you want to do next? And George Lucas said, well, I want to do a science fiction film, but, I want to do science fiction. And the phrase that Ron Howard used, like swashbuckling science fiction, like going back to the, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers serials, but with better special effects. And, of course, added samurai movies thrown in. And what you have here, to some extent, is like one of those, old swashbuckling romps with better special effects, albeit minus the samurais, which is, I think, a crucial omission. So, as we said before, we started out with Lord and Miller, who left the project very, very, long way into it. I mean, well over halfway into it. Everything stopped. They brought on Ron Howard. The reports say that he reshot up to 70% of it. No one's quite certain, but it's a major thing to do that far down the line on a movie this big. We do know that, previous Star Wars movies have had problems. We know that Rogue One had a troubled production, but it is still a very, very big deal. And the first thing to say is it's pretty surprising that with that kind of troubled history, the film actually hangs together as much as it did. If you saw it without knowing that production history, I don't think you'd think this looks like some kind of Frankenstein job in which it's been bolted together. It does have a kind of coherence. That said, it's it's a fairly lightweight coherence. Alden Ehrenreich is a very snappy bit of casting. I mean, he absolutely does, as you said in that interview, have that sense of being the young Harrison Ford. He is the young Han Solo. You can see him growing into the Harrison Ford character, although it is disappointing that at no point during any of the difficult things he has to do that they never managed to work in would that it was so simple. But I understand, obviously.
Would that have been meta? Is that the right?
It would have been so meta. And, the central relationship between, him and Chewbacca is kind of nicely done. It's probably the film's strongest suit. Their first meeting is kind of, it's entertaining and affectionate. And also the stuff about him and the Millennium Falcon and, seeing the Millennium Falcon and wanting to own the Millennium Falcon, that sort of, and the lust to be a part, all that sort of stuff. So that's, all that stuff is nicely done. Donald Glover has a lot of fun as Lando Calrissian, and I would like to see more of him. Actually,
there is talk of him having his own spin-off.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. There's basically talk of every piece of furniture in a Star Wars movie having its own spin-off, and in a way, that's kind of the problem. Firstly, I am starting to feel that, as Luke said, they're coming in too fast. It was 6 months ago or whatever that we were talking about Last Jedi, and it does seem to me that we're now getting to the point that we're going to be looking at a Star Wars movie in the past in which Luke fell asleep and he woke up 7 hours later. But what happened in those 7 hours? Well, here's a spin-off sequence to tell you. I mean, I'm starting to think enough, and as somebody who didn't love the Star Wars movies the first time around and was very, very underwhelmed by the prequels, and who really got it when The Force Awakens happened. And I very much liked Rogue One. As you know, I like Last Jedi, which is hated by some people. But there was a bit of me that felt, okay, fine, but I think you are starting to overload us. The second thing is that there's not a massive amount of jeopardy. I know that Ron Howard was saying that everything that happens in the Star Wars universe is a kind of life and death situation. It isn't really. I mean, with kind of because of where you are in the narrative, you kind of know where you're going. In the case of Rogue One, that it felt to me that there was a lot more at stake, that there was a lot more to be lost. There was a lot more chance for it to kind of break out and do something darker and to be that kind of war movie. Although, as I said, I know that Rogue One had a troubled production history as well, but I did feel whilst watching it that those Dirty Dozen comparisons kind of made sense. I thought in the case of this that whilst it was on, it was fine. It zipped around quite pleasantly. Paul Bettany is absolutely scene stealing, and actually from the Ron Howard point of view, it's the Ron Howard Paul Bettany axis, which is because obviously Ron Howard has worked with Paul Bettany many times before, and there's a story that Paul Bettany texted him and said, "I wonder whether you've ever found yourself sitting in a room wondering why you've never been in a Star Wars movie. Any suggestions?" And Ron Howard apparently sending back a message saying, "Hang on, give me a couple of days."
Wow!
And of course,
well, that worked well.
Yeah, and Bettany is brilliant. He is absolutely brilliant because for a start, as you know, he's one of my favourite actors, and he gets the chance to play fiendishness. He gets the chance to play a character who he's described as somebody who is very good at inflicting pain and likes doing what he's good at. Sorry, you were about to say something else.
No, I was just saying, he gets far more opportunity to show what he can do than he does in Marvel.
Yes, exactly.
It's a little bit limited and feeble.
Yeah, exactly. And I did really feel that he brought a kind of gangstery swagger to those scenes. I mean, that character started off being a completely different character, and actually once they started doing the reshoots, then Bettany comes in. So I mean, again, the amount of rejigging of the world of that film does seem to be pretty substantial, and I did really enjoy the Paul Bettany stuff. As far as all the the speed and the action sequences, and essentially it's the origin story wrapped around a heist movie. And the heist is that they have to get this, they're searching for a volatile energy substance, and there's a job, and it's going to be complicated, and things are going to go right, things are going to go wrong, blah, 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 blah. That kind of gives it a narrative thrust, but that's actually not what's really important. What's really important is what you want, the stuff that become, the relationships between the characters that and the relationships between the characters that, perhaps filling in gaps. So overall, I think it was fun enough but unessential. I think it lacked any great deal of jeopardy. I thought I could have lived without it, but whilst it was on, it was perfectly fine. I'm not entirely sure that I'm up for a whole swathe.
Tough luck.
Of these. Tough luck, because as you say, coming soon to a cinema near you, that lamp that appeared in episode 4, how did it get there?